Welcome back to Grifters or Gifted, the show where we take a no-holds-barred look at some of the most polarizing figures of our time, trying to figure out, are they changing the world or just lining their pockets?
Exactly. And, today we're diving deep into the world of Jack Ma,
Yeah, Jack Ma, the Alibaba founder. I
who
mean,
went from, humble English teacher to this tech titan to
yeah.
even starring in his own kung fu film.
Yeah, and that's a story in itself. Um, but, is he really a true visionary using his wealth to, make a positive impact on the world? Or was it all a carefully crafted act to line his own pockets?
It's a question that's been debated for years, especially given all those contradictory actions and statements. Like,
Yeah.
he preaches this hustle till you drop mentality, but then also talks about the importance of, giving back and philanthropy. And he criticizes the Chinese government while benefiting from its policies.
Yeah.
So he's this complex figure with a really captivating story, and, we're here to unpack it all.
Yeah, and we've got a ton of material to help us do just that.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got articles about his early life, analysis of his business decisions. We've got deep dives into his philanthropic work and even accounts of his run-ins with the Chinese government.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to examine it all to see if we can answer that big question. Is he a grifter or is he gifted?
Yeah. And to really understand Jack Ma, I think we have to start at the beginning because he didn't just stumble into success. This is someone who failed his college entrance exams twice, got rejected from a ton of jobs, even KFC, but he just kept pushing.
Yeah.
That kind of resilience is pretty striking.
Yeah, it's the classic underdog story. And, that's part of what makes him so compelling. He built Alibaba from the ground up in a China that was, rapidly changing.
Right.
And we've all heard about, those iron soldier salespeople going door to door, sometimes even dealing with guard dogs.
Yeah.
Just to get people signed up for Alibaba.
Think about that for a second. This was before e-commerce was even a thing in China, really. So they were essentially convincing businesses to trust this new, unproven platform.
Right.
It speaks to May's ability to sell a vision, to inspire people, even when the odds were stacked against them.
Absolutely. But that relentless drive, that emphasis on hustle at all costs is also what led to the 996 controversy, right?
Yeah.
This idea that working, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week is the key to success.
Yeah, he even called it a huge blessing.
Which is kind of a wild thing to say when you think about it.
And that's where things get complicated. The 996 work culture is,
Yeah.
Deeply embedded in China's tech industry.
Yeah.
But it's also been linked to burnout health problems, even deaths among workers.
Yeah.
And so it raises serious questions about whether Ma's vision came at the expense of his employees' well-being.
It's a tough line to walk. I mean, on one hand, you admire the ambition, the dedication to building something from nothing.
Right.
But on the other hand, you have to ask, at what cost?
Exactly. And that's why we can't just look at the success of Alibaba in isolation. We have to consider the full picture, including how that success was achieved.
Okay, so let's talk about his philanthropy because
Yeah.
Ma established the Jack Ma Foundation focusing on, education,
Mm-hmm.
the environment, women's empowerment.
Yeah.
He's pledged billions, even Alibaba should.
Yeah.
So, on the surface, it seems incredibly generous.
He's supporting teacher training in rural China, funding research on wetland preservation, even partnering with the Queen Rania Foundation to support educational initiatives in the Middle East.
Wow.
Like, he's tackling some big, important issues.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with the causes he's supporting.
Yeah.
But the timing of his philanthropic surge is interesting. It really took off after the Alibaba IPO in 2014.
Right.
And especially after the backlash against 996 started gaining traction.
You're right to point that out. It does make you wonder if this was, genuine altruism or a calculated move to kind of soften his image to manage public perception, particularly after those controversies.
There's a quote from Ma in 2010 that stands out to me. He said, "Today, China needs more jobs than philanthropy. I understand when I am 80 years old giving the money away, I should spend the money now to create jobs."
Okay.
So, I mean,
It's a compelling argument.
yeah.
He's essentially saying that by building successful businesses, he's doing more good than he could through traditional charity.
Right.
But, it doesn't address the concerns about worker exploitation under the 996 system.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have his very public clash with the Chinese government.
Right. That speech where he criticized China's financial system as having a pawn shop mentality was kind of a turning point.
Yeah.
It happened just weeks before Ant Group's planned IPO, which was poised to be the world's largest.
Right.
And then, boom, the Chinese authorities halted it.
The timing was certainly suspicious. I mean,
Yes.
was it legitimate regulatory concern about ant groups, growing power? Or was it retribution for Ma speaking out against the establishment?
Right.
It's a debate that's still going on today.
It's interesting because the Chinese government had actually been quite supportive of Alibaba's growth. They saw it as a symbol of, China's economic rise on the global stage.
Yeah.
But when Ma started criticizing the very system that helped him succeed, it seems like he crossed a line.
Yeah, and the consequences were pretty swift. The Chinese government launched investigations into Alibaba, accusing them of monopolistic practices.
Wow.
They hit the company with a record $2.8 billion fine for violating anti-monopoly rules.
I mean, that's no joke. And then suddenly the man who was once the poster child for China's tech boom was facing, serious challenges. And then he just vanished, disappeared from public view for 3 months, sparking all sorts of wild theories about his whereabouts.
And his reappearance was just as carefully orchestrated as his disappearance. First, he popped up at a golf course. Then he was teaching at a university in Tokyo and later making appearances at conferences and charity events.
It felt very deliberate, like he was trying to project this new image, the humble philanthropist. The man who had learned his lesson and was retreating from the limelight. But had he really changed, or was this all just part of a bigger strategy?
That's a great question.
We'll explore that more in the next part of our deep dive.
Yeah, it's fascinating how his retreat from Alibaba coincided with, a noticeable shift in his public persona. He went from the outspoken entrepreneur to this advocate for education and sustainability.
It makes you wonder if he realized that pushing that hustle at all costs narrative had backfired.
Right.
Maybe he saw philanthropy as a way to not only improve his image, but also to genuinely try to create a more balanced world.
He's talked about how his own experiences shaped his views on philanthropy. He didn't come from wealth. He struggled. He saw how education could be a path to a better life.
Right.
So, it's not surprising that the Jack Ma Foundation has focused on empowering others through education and entrepreneurship.
They've funded a 10-year program to train and develop teachers in rural China, launched initiatives to support women entrepreneurs in Africa and the Middle East. These are areas that are often overlooked by traditional philanthropy.
And what's interesting is that he's not just writing checks. He's involved, he's traveled extensively, met with world leaders, spoken at global conferences about these causes.
Right.
He even partnered with Prince William's Earthshot Prize to find solutions to environmental problems.
That's a pretty big deal. It shows that he's thinking globally, not just about China's problems, but about challenges that affect us all.
His foundation's mission is to promote harmonious development between humanity and nature. He seems to understand that environmental issues like climate change are linked to social and economic well-being.
It's a far cry from the profit above all else image that a lot of tech companies have.
But it's important to remember that actions speak louder than words. It remains to be seen whether his philanthropic efforts will actually lead to systemic change.
Oh, yeah.
Some critics argue that it's all just a way to make amends for past mistakes, like his support for the 996 work culture.
Yeah, it makes you think, could he have used his power and influence to advocate for, better labor protections in China's tech industry?
Yeah.
Could he have done more to address those issues earlier on?
It's a fair question, and it highlights the complexity of trying to assess someone's true motives.
Right.
Are they trying to right past wrongs or simply trying to protect their reputation? It's hard to say for sure.
Okay, let's talk about Ma's leadership style for a minute, because he's known for his charisma.
Right.
People compare him to Steve Jobs in his ability to articulate a vision and get people excited about it.
He's a master storyteller. He uses humor, personal anecdotes, and simple language to connect with audiences, even when talking about, complex ideas.
Right.
And he's also not afraid to admit his failures to talk about the lessons he's learned.
I remember him saying, never give up. Today is hard. Tomorrow will be worse, but the day after tomorrow will be sunshine.
Okay.
It's that kind of optimistic, never give up attitude that really resonates with people.
That quote is interesting because it speaks to his resilience, but it also hints at a certain ruthlessness, this idea that you have to push through hardship no matter what.
Right.
And that can be a dangerous mindset, especially if it comes at the expense of others.
Right. It ties back to that question of, at what cost that we talked about earlier.
Exactly. And it's why it's so difficult to put Jack Ma in a neat little box. He's got this compelling personal story. He's achieved incredible success. He's talking about important causes, but he's also made some questionable choices along the way.
He's a walking contradiction.
Yeah.
And that's what makes him so fascinating to analyze.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward a bit. Ma stepped down as Alibaba's chairman in 2019.
Right.
It was a carefully orchestrated transition, with him focusing more on philanthropy and education.
Yeah.
He made appearances at schools, conferences, even visited a rural village in China to promote sustainable agriculture.
It was all very strategic. He was clearly trying to rebrand himself as this global ambassador for social good, someone who had learned from his past mistakes and was using his wealth and influence to, make a positive impact.
But then he disappeared again
Yeah.
for most a year, and people started speculating, is he under house arrest? Did he flee the country?
Right. And when he finally reappeared in 2023, it was in Japan teaching a course on innovation and entrepreneurship at Tokyo College.
That was a surprising move. Why Japan?
Well, think about it. Japan has a strong entrepreneurial culture, but it's also a more open and democratic society than China.
Right.
So it was a safe haven for Ma to rebuild his image, to distance himself from the scrutiny of the Chinese government.
It seems like it worked. He's been slowly reemerging, making appearances at international conferences, even meeting with world leaders. He's still got that charisma, but his tone is definitely more subdued than it was during his Alibaba days.
It's a remarkable comeback for someone who just a few years ago seemed to have fallen from grace. It shows his resilience, his ability to adapt to changing circumstances, and his understanding of how to control the narrative.
But it also begs the question, has he truly changed? Or is this just another calculated move to protect his interests and regain favor?
Yeah, it really does. And it's a call that I think lingers as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Jack Ma. I mean,
Yeah.
he's built a business empire.
Yeah.
He's championed philanthropy and clashed with authorities, all while maintaining this, captivating public persona. So after looking at all the evidence, what's the verdict? Grifter or gifted?
Well, it's tempting to want a simple answer,
Yeah.
but the truth is Jack Ma really defies easy categorization. He's a product of his environment, a man driven by ambition and a desire to make a difference.
Yeah.
But he's also someone who's made decisions that have negatively impacted others.
It's almost like there are two Jack Ma's.
Right.
You've got the charismatic leader who inspires with his vision and talks about using business to create, positive change.
But then there's the side that, pushes a grueling work culture and seems to prioritize profit above all else.
And that duality is what makes him such a compelling figure to study. He embodies the complexities and contradictions of a generation of entrepreneurs who came of age during China's economic boom.
Yeah. It's a reminder that success, even on a massive scale like Alibaba, doesn't necessarily equate to being a good person.
Right, and conversely, even those who have made mistakes can still strive to use their wealth and influence for good. It's up to each of us to decide what we make of his actions and his legacy.
We've seen how he's tried to reinvent himself, shifting from the business world to focus on philanthropy and education. But we've also seen how those efforts have been met with skepticism, with people questioning his motives.
Yeah, it all circles back to that central question. Is he genuinely trying to make the world a better place? Or is it all just a calculated strategy to protect his own interests?
Right.
There's evidence to support both sides of the argument.
It's a question that goes beyond Jack Ma. It's something we should be asking about all powerful figures, especially in the tech world.
Absolutely. As consumers, investors, and citizens, we have a responsibility to be critical thinkers, to look beyond the carefully crafted narratives and examine the impact these individuals and companies are having on society.
We need to ask ourselves, are they truly using their power to create positive change? Or are they just lining their pockets while exploiting workers and dodging regulations?
It's not always easy to find the answers, but it's a conversation we need to be having. And we hope that this deep dive into the world of Jack Ma has given you some food for thought.
We've explored his entrepreneurial journey, his controversial leadership style, his forays into philanthropy, and his complex relationship with the Chinese government. We've seen both his brilliance and his flaws, his triumphs and his missteps.
And ultimately, it's up to each listener to decide where they land on the spectrum of grifter or gifted.
There's one final thought I want to leave you with. Jack Ma once said, "The world is full of opportunities. Some people see them, some people grab them."
It's a quote that speaks to his entrepreneurial spirit, his belief in the power of, seizing the moment.
But it also raises a question. What happens when those opportunities come at a cost to others? What responsibility do we have to ensure that those who grab those opportunities are using them to create a world that benefits everyone, not just themselves?
That's the challenge we face as we navigate this ever-evolving landscape of power, innovation, and social responsibility. And it's a challenge that requires us to be informed, engaged, and willing to ask the tough questions.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Jack Ma. We encourage you to continue exploring these ideas, to do your own research, and to engage in thoughtful conversations about the kind of future we want to build.